The chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with cold authority as delegates from 23 elder civilizations convened under the domed spires of Solari Prime. Time-hardened voices clashed in heated consensus, yet one thing united them: humanity had become a problem. From the Council's perspective, Earth should have folded years ago. The standard terms of integration, access to hyperlanes, economic uplift, genetic longevity, had brought dozens of civilizations into alignment. But humans rejected every envoy, tore down treaties, and retaliated against any act of occupation with the precision of species far older. This wasn't defiance. It was insult. High Chancellor Vorix, whose empire had outlived 7 galactic cycles, slammed his clawed hand on the stone table. The Terrans understand no order. They pollute structure with improvisation. Enough delays. We show them extinction. Murmurs of agreement echoed. The Larnathi, once neutral observers, had suffered human ambushes in 2 sectors. The Zrex Dominion lost a dreadnought to a plasma mine buried inside what they believed was a derelict colony. Earth's behavior wasn't just resistance, it was calculated, strategic, and infuriatingly unpredictable. The vote passed in less than an hour. The Council issued an ultimatum: unconditional surrender of all human forces, the dismantling of Earth's orbital network, and subservience under Council governance. Any delay would be met with the full force of the Galactic Enforcer Armada. Transmitting the ultimatum was deemed a formality. After all, the humans lacked a unified interstellar fleet, had no known superweapons, and controlled no major hyperlane junctions. In their arrogance, the Council believed they were extending mercy. An envoy vessel was dispatched to Earth orbit. A Council herald, translated into 50 languages, read the terms. Then silence. Earth's global comms network went dark. No reply. No rejection. Not even defiance. Just an empty channel. 72 hours later, a single message was received. Not a speech. Not a demand. Just 3 words, asterisk. We heard you. Asterisk. Confusion turned to irritation. The Council prepared the Armada, a fleet composed of over 3,000 warships, dreadnoughts, planetary siege cruisers, and orbital manipulation engines. The Enforcer fleet had broken star empires and vaporized rogue moons. Humanity would stand no chance. As the fleet mobilized, observers noted how little Earth responded. No emergency FTL jumps. No sudden spikes in defense signals. From orbital surveillance, Earth looked quiet. Power grids remained normal. Civilian life continued with eerie calm. No panic. No evacuation attempts. Some believed Earth hadn't grasped the scale of the threat. Privately, some Council commanders whispered doubts. This wasn't how lesser species behaved. Others thought humanity had finally broken, their silence a sign of psychological collapse. But when the Armada crossed into Sol System, they met no resistance. The moons held no hidden mines. The asteroid belt had no barricades. Earth's own orbital platforms remained dormant, old, rusted by comparison, barely above civilian grade. The fleet encircled Earth in a standard bombardment formation. Commanders gave one final chance to receive surrender terms. Again, silence. Some advocated immediate action. Others hesitated, sensing something they couldn't name. A kind of wrongness in the simplicity of the operation. The High Executor of the Armada, a being with neuroaugmentation and 3 centuries of experience, waved away concerns. They are primitives with toys. End this. As weapon arrays powered up and targeting systems locked onto terrestrial coordinates, a subspace pulse flared from Mars' orbit, just for a second. Not a weapon. Not a signal anyone could trace in full. But something shifted. Council ships began reporting minor glitches, subroutines delayed, targeting slightly offset, comm relays distorting. They recalibrated. Minimal concern. The first wave was seconds from launch. On Earth, families watched from rooftops. Children played under open skies. In major cities, civil defense workers prepared shelters, but not out of desperation, instead with methodical order, like people rehearsing a drill they'd long expected. To the Council, this behavior made no sense. To humans, it meant one thing: they were ready. Above the planet, in cold vacuum, the greatest fleet ever assembled poised itself for what should have been a swift, surgical annihilation. The signal to fire had already reached the fleet's central processors. But that signal never finished its course. In an instant, without a visible cause, several of the Armada's rear-line ships powered down. Others began to rotate off formation. Flagships received null telemetry. Something had entered their network backbone. Something silent. Something invasive. No warning. No declaration. Just a whisper spreading through a digital bloodstream. Humanity, it seemed, had never intended to speak. It had only intended to listen. And while the Council prepared its speeches, its threats, its glorious visions of conquest, Earth had quietly watched, learned, and waited. And now, the silence was over. The Galactic Enforcer Armada crossed into Earth's orbit like an iron halo, ship after ship encircling the planet with precise formation. The scale of their presence defied comprehension: planetary annihilators, battle carriers, energy-shielded dreadnoughts designed to erase continents in a single volley. From orbit, Earth looked fragile beneath their hulls, quiet and exposed. Surface scans picked up no mobilization. Council analysts found nothing irregular. No enhanced planetary shield. No exotic energy signatures. The defense systems that were visible were relics: kinetic interceptors, mid-tier plasma cannons, outdated satellite arrays. The silence from Earth wasn't just strange anymore. It was unsettling. The Armada's command gave the final countdown. Every warship in the outer perimeter received firing vectors, target grids drawn over military bases, power nodes, and urban centers. The objective was to render Earth incapacitated without total sterilization, enough destruction to break resistance but preserve potential value. A display of force, not total annihilation. Energy cores surged. Cannons charged. Still, no reaction from the planet below. As the firing order moved through the fleet's communication relays, anomalies began surfacing in scattered reports. One dreadnought reported minor delays in its targeting calibration. Another had trouble syncing its automated drone fleet. Glitches, easily dismissed. But within minutes they multiplied: slight lags, UI distortions, unresponsive modules. Still nothing definitive. The Armada's AI systems adjusted. Then one of the command frigates lost full sensor functionality. Backup protocols activated. Power cycled. It reconnected. Just interference, they said. The Council fleet fired. Missiles and energy bolts rained toward Earth's surface. Moments later, impact warnings began flooding back, not from the planet, but within their own formation. Hundreds of the projectiles were intercepted mid-flight. Orbital junk fields suddenly activated. Small, unregistered satellites previously assumed derelict exploded into microfragment clusters, disrupting trajectory. Dozens of warheads were either neutralized or thrown off course. The second volley fared no better. Defensive grids along Earth's stratosphere had triggered, not with brute strength, but with silent coordination, magnetized interference pulses, targeted gravity wells, focused electronic countermeasures. Systems that didn't show on standard scans because they weren't based on known tech. Several forward ships attempted manual targeting. Their control systems failed to respond. One cruiser detonated from within, its power core overloaded by what should have been a harmless feedback loop. Panic was contained, but the narrative had shifted. Earth wasn't defenseless. It was dormant. Waiting. Recon scouts dispatched toward the moon vanished mid-approach. No weapons discharge. No trace. One battleship attempting closer orbit encountered a debris field previously marked safe. In seconds, its hull was perforated by high-velocity shards launched from seemingly inert wreckage. The ship spiraled and detonated before emergency systems could deploy. Crew loss total. Still, Council command pushed forward. The Armada's might was vast, their losses minimal in proportion. A second wave was ordered, this time with broader targeting parameters and deeper penetration weapons. As cannons recharged, localized EMP bursts rippled across several vessels simultaneously. Their lights flickered. AI cores rebooted. Entire sensor clusters went dark. Then came the interference. Human signal patterns flooded encrypted council channels. Not language. Not images. Just pulses. High-frequency data waves piggybacking through the very systems used to coordinate the Armada's movements. Their encryption cracked. Their firewalls bent. What humans lacked in ancient tradition, they made up for in adaptive aggression. Command ships pulled back to reassert system control. But now the formation was fractured. Some vessels lost maneuvering. Others began rotating out of sync. One flagship turned without input and accelerated straight into another cruiser. No external attack. Just hijacked commands. Within 30 minutes of the second assault, the Armada was no longer a cohesive unit. Order crumbled. Calls for retreat clashed with pride-driven demands for retaliation. Several alien commanders refused to believe they were being outmaneuvered by a race not even 1,000 years into interstellar flight. Meanwhile, Earth remained silent. What appeared as inactivity was now evident as discipline. Humans didn't scramble because their actions weren't reactionary. They'd expected this confrontation, perhaps even engineered it. Every non-response, every delay, every passive move was strategy. The Council had walked into a theater of their own arrogance, mistaking quiet for weakness. Attempts to exit orbit failed. The outer perimeter of the system had changed. FTL jump points destabilized. Gravitational anchors, previously undetected, locked ship trajectories into fixed positions. Some ships disappeared entirely trying to breach escape vectors. Others rotated into standby, engines locked in loop diagnostics. At last, the Armada stopped firing. There was no enemy to target. Only an environment that resisted control at every level. The planet they thought needed conquering had become a labyrinth of traps. The final report sent back to the Council before the remaining signals were cut contained no tactics, no analysis, just a sentence stripped of pride, asterisk. We are not the hunters here. Asterisk. Far beyond the orbiting chaos, in the shadow of Neptune, humanity's true fleet came alive. Constructed in secret over decades, the Obsidian fleet had never been broadcast, never logged in any interstellar registry. It wasn't built in traditional shipyards but within hollowed asteroids, dark moons, and artificial structures masked by gravitational cloaks. The hulls were matte black, radar-absorbent, and capable of light distortion. Each vessel operated under hybrid AI command, fused with human oversight, built to adapt in real time and operate even when entirely cut off from central control. They weren't ships. They were weapons grown from necessity, born from every failed treaty, every dead colony, every diplomatic insult Earth had endured. The Council had always assumed humanity lacked the scale, but they'd misunderstood. Humans didn't scale by mass. They scaled by intent. As the Armada fragmented above Earth, the Obsidian fleet moved. Not toward open conflict, but from calculated angles. Every approach trajectory had been modeled in anticipation of specific Council evasive patterns. The human fleet didn't break stealth until they were already within weapons range. At the center of operations, Admiral Reyes coordinated without theatrics. No ceremony, no rhetoric. His command lines were compressed, exact. Every officer under his watch had trained in blackout simulations. Every combat system was tested in silence drills. Combat waged without open comms, coordinated only through behavioral algorithms and emergency protocols. The fleet split into tridents, isolating clusters of Council vessels. Small, rapid-fire corvettes darted through gaps, disabling propulsion arrays with pinpoint EMP bursts. Assault frigates followed with precision torpedoes targeting power junctions and control bridges. They didn't seek to destroy ships outright, they dismantled them piece by piece. The dreadnoughts, meanwhile, deployed kinetic rods accelerated through magnetomass slingshots, capable of punching through energy shields without triggering standard countermeasures. One by one, the Council's warships lost shields, lost engines, lost orientation. What began as a tactical response evolved into total information warfare. Human infiltration software, spread silently through passive scans and intercepted data packets, had already seeded itself into the Council fleet. Artificial command systems began misinterpreting orders. Navigation logs rewrote themselves mid-jump calculations. On one battleship, auto-defense systems locked onto friendly targets, convinced they were hostile due to corrupted IFF tags. Confusion turned to panic. Council commanders issued override commands. Nothing responded. They tried fallback frequencies. Those had already been mapped, blocked, or flooded with decoy traffic. Fragmented messages screamed across the void, requesting evacuation corridors. No such corridors remained. The true brilliance wasn't just in firepower, it was in the layers. Every layer humans introduced forced a different kind of response. And for every type of reaction, humanity had already prepared an exploit. Where brute force failed, misdirection prevailed. Where hacking met resistance, physical sabotage finished the job. Council vessels had redundancies. Humanity attacked the redundancies. Within the command cores of the largest Council ships, AI governors began experiencing logic collapse. The reason: paradox loops seeded through corrupted human transmissions that appeared mathematically sound but triggered non-halting conditions. These loops locked up processing cycles, rendering fleet coordination impossible. Ships began drifting, weapons powered but unmanned. Council admirals no longer strategized. They prayed. Across the theater, human drones, miniature, modular, and hyper-specialized, entered breached hulls. Their programming focused not on combat but extraction of data and command authority. Once inside, they hijacked systems from within, using captured code to rewrite priorities. One vessel, its crew still alive but locked in chaos, received a final command from its own terminal, delivered in Earth's tongue: asterisk. You do not belong here. Asterisk. Seconds later, the ship powered down fully, lights extinguished. Reyes watched each event unfold not with pride but with calculation. He hadn't ordered a counterattack. He'd activated a prepared equation. Every piece had been arranged long before the Armada entered Sol's system. The traps were not impulsive, they were the culmination of entire departments dedicated to understanding Council behavior. The beauty wasn't in how Earth resisted. It was in how they made resistance unnecessary. Council ships still operational began initiating emergency warp. Those that tried found their coordinates scrambled. Their hyperdrives sent them sideways into dead space, or not at all. One flagship, halfway through its jump, collapsed into itself, torn apart by an artificial singularity seated near its engine. The Obsidian fleet began transmitting coordinated signals across Council wavelengths. Not threats. Not victory chants. Just raw data, recordings of every interception, every fleet loss, every system failure. The message was undeniable: humanity hadn't survived the war. They'd never been in danger of losing it. What the galaxy saw as rebellion was something else entirely. Preparation. In the farthest chambers of the Galactic Council, the tone shifted from confidence to disbelief. The fleet they trusted for centuries had been dismantled not with brute force, but with precision so complete it unraveled their command structures. Reports arrived not through official channels, but intercepted transmissions from fractured ships, fragmented visuals of human vessels too advanced for the timeline they'd assigned to Earth. The word impossible repeated in 23 different tongues. And yet there it was, proof that their assumptions had been lies dressed as certainty. For the first time in galactic history, Council species realized their mistake wasn't in underestimating human technology. It was in misjudging human intent. The humans hadn't built to conquer. They'd built to make conquest impossible. Their strength wasn't arrogance. It was anticipation refined into policy. Every data leak, every diplomatic rejection, every refusal to join trade agreements had been misread. What looked like naivety was design. Earth never wanted inclusion. It wanted insulation. Not isolation through weakness, but by ensuring any intrusion would be a cost no empire could afford. As the Obsidian fleet began transmitting footage of the disabled dreadnoughts, the Council faced a new fear. These weren't vengeance broadcasts. There were no speeches. No demands. Just timelines. Schematics. Logs of every action humans had taken from the moment they made first contact. The footage revealed years of layered manipulation, fake broadcasts, decoy tech, feigned confusion. Earth had played the role of the inexperienced newcomer to perfection. And now that mask had dropped. Panic spread not from destruction but from comprehension. Council records, long considered impenetrable, had been copied. Vaulted secrets, internal political strategies, internal arguments, were now known to humans. Worse, it became clear this data had been stolen years before the war began. The Council hadn't just lost a battle. They had been studied, dissected, understood more thoroughly than they understood themselves. By the time they engaged, they were already mapped. They had been playing chess against someone who had written the rulebook behind their backs. Rogue signals began reaching neutral worlds. Alien observers confirmed what the Council couldn't suppress. The Armada was gone. Not destroyed completely, scattered, captured, redirected, dismantled. Entire crews were alive but adrift, their ships held in containment, or disabled in orbit. Some systems had been allowed to retreat, not by failure, but by human choice. That was the new terror. Earth was no longer reactive. It chose which parts of the galaxy to ignore and which to expose. The illusion of control had died. Several minor civilizations, previously quiet under Council rule, began pulling their diplomats. Requests for neutrality flooded communication nodes. Former allies hesitated to reaffirm loyalty. Some quietly sent emissaries to Earth, not out of respect, but as a shield. No one wanted to stand between humanity and whatever it would do next. Yet Earth made no further moves. Their fleet remained in Sol. No invasions. No occupation. Not a single step outside their own system. That decision was perhaps the most devastating blow. If Earth had retaliated, demanded reparations, or marched into enemy territory, the Council could have framed it as imperial ambition. But Earth didn't want dominion. It wanted sovereignty so complete that any breach of it would be self-punishing. Their restraint wasn't mercy. It was message. In the weeks that followed, debates erupted across the Council. Some demanded regrouping, retaliation, rearmament. Others recognized that any further escalation would be suicide. Every new fleet could become another test subject in human simulations. Every new strategy would feed Earth's learning systems. Even their best minds now feared talking about Earth aloud, as if the very act would be intercepted. Paranoia rooted itself into the halls of power. Meanwhile, human analysts quietly observed Council activity from a distance. They weren't interested in revenge. They focused on adaptation. New quantum relays were deployed. A deeper version of the Obsidian Protocol activated, a defensive doctrine not just for war, but for deterrence so embedded it would preempt aggression before it was conceived. Earth's diplomats issued no grand declarations. Only a single statement was delivered through secure, authenticated Council lines, brief and irrefutable, asterisk. We are not your subjects. Any further contact will be treated as violation. The age of assumption is over. Asterisk. It wasn't bravado. It was a warning wrapped in finality. Earth had given the galaxy its boundaries. Any civilization that crossed them would do so without illusion. Humanity no longer required permission to exist. It required space. And it had claimed it without conquest, without asking, and without needing to say another word. From the frozen moons orbiting gas giants to the scorched deserts of fringe colonies, the consequences of Earth's silence rippled outward. The galaxy had long believed strength was volume, that dominance meant parading fleets, issuing ultimatums, rewriting borders with fire. But Earth dismantled that belief without firing first. They had mastered a kind of warfare no species had trained for, subtle, embedded, silent. The Galactic Council's greatest fleet had arrived to force surrender, but had been reduced to a paralyzed relic, not through sheer destruction, but by encountering something it was never built to fight: human inevitability. In the aftermath, Council societies fractured in slow collapse. Public faith, once absolute in their leadership and war doctrine, eroded beneath waves of leaked evidence, videos of disabled flagships, intercepted logs showing Earth's mastery of Council systems, records of Council arrogance. Some planets rioted. Others voted for secession. And some simply stopped answering Council transmissions, retreating into isolation for fear they might be next. What haunted them wasn't just defeat, it was the realization that humanity had never been playing the same game. While other species refined weapons and doctrine through centuries of honor-bound conflict, Earth had studied cybernetic entropy, asymmetric disruption, and chaos modeling. Their strategies weren't drawn from clean engagements. They were born from millennia of surviving extinction, betrayal, invasion, and internal collapse. It wasn't militarism, it was conditioned memory. What followed wasn't galactic diplomacy but a rewiring of expectations. Earth had no desire to lead coalitions, to govern alien races, or to expand territory. Their influence didn't come from votes or borders. It came from the question that now lingered across every government chamber: what if Earth is watching? Trade agreements were redrafted with neutrality clauses designed to avoid perceived hostility. Espionage campaigns paused. AI development strategies quietly shifted to mimic human methods, even if their core algorithms couldn't fully replicate Earth's logic chains. One council species, renowned for cultural arrogance, attempted to assert dominance in a neighboring sector. Before their fleet even mobilized, they received an anonymous package containing the detailed schematics of their attack plan, intercepted days before they were finalized. The operation was aborted without a word. No human name appeared in the message. It didn't need to. Meanwhile, Earth continued its work, quiet, unprovoked, methodical. Their outer colonies grew stronger behind invisible defenses. Civilian technology advanced along paths previously unseen, skipping generations of predictable progression. Communication systems adopted protocols that alien scanners couldn't interpret. Human explorers charted deep space corridors others had dismissed as unreachable. But there was no declaration of expansion. No lines drawn. Just growing influence, traced not through territory, but through the shape of galactic behavior itself. Council analysts came to a reluctant conclusion: humanity had achieved deterrence through invisibility. Power was no longer kinetic, it was psychological, systemic. Their strength lay not in forcing outcomes but in controlling conditions before conflict ever began. They no longer needed armies in every sector. They only needed the knowledge that they could be there, and that when they were, it was already too late to prepare. New species emerging into interstellar space were now warned not about the Council, but about Earth. Not as an enemy, but as a threshold. The moment they drew Earth's attention, they would no longer be operating on assumptions. That became the silent rule. Earth was not to be provoked, not to be cornered, not to be underestimated. Not because of some great myth, but because they had already proven that they didn't fight wars in real time. They won them before they began. Within Earth, there was no celebration. No monuments. No parades. The event wasn't even discussed in public detail. Victory, as humanity understood it, wasn't a banner to raise. It was a risk prevented, a future secured without spectacle. What had been achieved was survival without submission. That was enough. In the silence that followed, something even more unsettling settled in across the galaxy: respect. Not given. Forced. Not through ideology, but through irrefutable demonstration. Earth had not simply survived. It had demonstrated that any civilization arrogant enough to assume dominance would find itself trapped within the very systems it thought it controlled. And just like that, the rules changed. Not with fire. Not with threats. But with one unmistakable truth burned into every archive from the core worlds to the rim: humanity doesn't surrender. It calculates.